Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. Please enter your questions for the presenters in the questions panel in your GoToWebinar control window. And at the end of the presentation, we will get to them in the order received. This session will be recorded, and the slides will be available on our website shortly after the webinar concludes. Now I'll pass it over to our presenters, Anthony Leverington, Country Manager for ANZ, and Sean Maritz, Technical Solutions Architect for ANZ.
Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar today on replacing and augmenting F5 with NGINX Plus. My name is Anthony Leverington. I'm the Country Manager for NGINX in Australia and New Zealand. And my co-presenter today is Sean Maritz, who is an NGINX Solution Architect working out of Sydney. A quick look at the agenda for today. I'm going to start with an introduction to NGINX, as well as some common use cases and architectures that we do see with NGINX today. I'm then going to hand over to Sean, who's going to discuss some of the trends that are disrupting F5 and some of the other hardware ADCs out there in the market. Sean's going to provide you with some options to help you move away from F5 to NGINX, and then he's going to go into a little bit more detail about some other NGINX use cases. And to finish off, we're going to present a customer success story that was recently presented at NGINX Conf in Atlanta. So many of you know that NGINX started its life as an open source project back in 2003. The open source project was so successful that in 2011, NGINX Inc. was founded, and our first commercial product, being NGINX Plus, was released in 2013. We are a VC-backed organisation. We've recently gone through our Series C round of funding with Goldman Sachs for $43 million. We have offices that span the globe now. More recently, we opened up Tokyo on the 1st of October. There's over 1,500 customers today using our commercial products, and we have a little over 250 employees. So one of the things I really do love about NGINX Plus is that I haven't yet come across a customer that doesn't have a use case for NGINX Plus. And as you can see from this slide, one of the reasons for this is because NGINX Plus can be so many different personalities. And not only can NGINX Plus provide all this functionality that you can see in this slide, we can do it in a single highly available elastic tier that can run in any environment. So that environment could be bare metal, it could be a virtual machine, it could be a Docker container. All we need to run, in fact, is a Linux distribution. Also, we can run in any type of environment, albeit public cloud, private cloud, or a hybrid cloud. And whilst today our main focus is using NGINX as a load balancer, I think it's an important fact to point out that during a recent customer survey, that 40% of our customers are actually using NGINX Plus as an API gateway. So as I mentioned earlier, NGINX Plus is born out of open source. And we see customers moving from open source to NGINX Plus for a number of reasons. And reasons could be, for example, support. But most of the time it's because of the enterprise class features that we do provide. And if you take a look at the slide here on the right hand side, you can see some of those features. And I'll just go through some of them. You get the active health checks, session persistence. There's a lot of extra load balancing algorithms you do get with NGINX Plus. In fact, we have some algorithms that are specific to microservices. You get the HA and clustering capabilities, which are very important for any enterprise. Also, the importance of APIs are growing in customer environments today, and as a result, we find that many of them are starting to look at things such as JWT authentication or JSON Web Token authentication. Now, you also have the ability to use the NGINX Plus API with NGINX Plus, and this can be useful to assist you with the automation of your NGINX Plus configurations as well as your NGINX deployments. Dynamic reloads give you the ability to load a new NGINX configuration without interruption to the service. And with NGINX Plus, you also have over 90 performance monitoring metrics that are unique to Plus. In an earlier slide, I showed the multitude of functions that NGINX Plus can perform. And one of the advantages of this for customers is it really enables them to simplify their application architectures. Now, this slide here shows a before shot of one of our customers. We have sanitized this slide a little bit by adding some extra vendors, but in reality, this customer was actually using many of the vendors you do see on this slide. And you can see this is actually quite a complex architecture, but it's not an uncommon architecture that you do see out there today. And from this slide, you can see you had a user going into a CDN, which was then going into a WAF, traffic then going into a layer 4 balancer, into a layer 7 load balancer, into an API gateway, and then back out through a layer 4 load balancer before the traffic was then distributed to the application. And now you can see after implementing NGINX Plus, the architecture has been somewhat simplified. You still have the user going into a CDN, which in this case is an NGINX Plus, but it could have been depending on what the customer requirements were. The traffic then goes into the layer 4 load balancer and then into the NGINX Plus tier that it's now functioning as the reverse proxy load balancer and API gateway. And the traffic's then directed either to the monolithic application or towards their microservices environment, where NGINX Plus is being used as an ingress controller for Kubernetes for the north-south traffic, and then into the containerized applications where NGINX Plus is being used as a sidecar proxy for the east-west traffic. So my final slide, a few months ago, we released NGINX Controller to manage and monitor all your NGINX Plus instances. Now, initially, Controller only fulfills the load balancing function, but soon it's going to fulfill the API management and also the service mesh management functions. It's a little bit of a vision slide, but it does give you a good idea into the direction that we're heading. So just bear with us for a moment whilst I hand over to Sean, and Sean's going to continue with the industry trends that are disrupting F5 today.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Just bear with me 1 second. I am just going to remove that error message that's popped up. Right, and thank you very much for joining us. As Anthony mentioned, today I am going to take us through 5 industry trends that are really disrupting the F5 architecture. So what I'll be going through is really how the public cloud is affecting proprietary hardware vendors, the effect that the DevOps function has had on change processes and becoming more agile in the application development process, how commodity hardware is changing physical infrastructure requirements versus proprietary hardware, the open source community and its effect on application development, and then what microservices require to be effective in the application development process. So in this first trend, we find that a lot of SaaS companies are taking business away from companies like F5 because there's no need to do things like load balancing of Exchange servers if you're using Office 365. And when migrating to the cloud, you're generally limited to the SaaS provider's deployment options. Installing hardware in a public cloud is, in most cases, near impossible, but the options for deploying software load balancers are still present and tend to be more cost-effective and just as, if not more capable than the proprietary hardware options. And NGINX is commonly used to provide this function due to its portability and our agnostic approach in choosing cloud providers. Virtual appliances are still an option for some of these proprietary hardware vendors, but their price points still remain pretty high so not to cannibalize their hardware sales. And generally, these virtualized appliances have limitations on changes that can be made, specifically to cater for the cloud ecosystems. And then, of course, there's limitations on scaling up and down. So normally, so for instance, would be 5 gigabit per second throughput that is limited with a pre-built AMI. It normally requires an upgrade license, so the ability to scale up and down is quite limited. So NGINX Plus customers, our biggest customers are actually SaaS providers. So, and because we are a cloud native software, the ability to manage resources automatically, handling continuous business changes and needs is quite agile, and the ability to minimize failure risks is definitely pervasive in our capabilities within the public cloud. There is a quote there at the bottom, and please excuse me, I'm not going to read through all of our quotes, but on each of our slides, we're pretty much going to have a quote from some of our customers. So there's a quote there just on the ability to scale up and down is quite easy. The next trend is really the advent of DevOps and the requirements to be more agile in the change of applications. And this is an imperative function within the DevOps environment. As you can see from the quote below, in some cases, customers will take 2 weeks for any change to be made in their infrastructure. And then sometimes they never even have actual direct access to the teams that manage this. It can also be quite a costly event to take place, particularly if you're using a managed service provider where they charge for every change that you are going to make. So the ability for DevOps people to be able to make those changes rapidly is quite important. Then, of course, there's also the skill set of managing some of the network capabilities in those load balancing configurations. And in most cases, you'll need some sort of networking background to be able to have those changes made or make those changes yourself. Whereas NGINX Plus works with all the DevOps tools and the automation of application infrastructure deployments and the modification of the applications are comparatively instant. And there's no real need to rely on a networking background to make the changes in the environment. Our third trend is really more around the commodity hardware. So commodity hardware costs are going down and the performance capabilities is increasing. So the purchasing of proprietary hardware is the questionable decision, particularly since they are quite often, relatively more expensive than your commodity hardware. And the ability to support various different instruction set architectures is limited, with the vendor choosing what their hardware is going to be running on. Whereas NGINX Plus does not dictate this and will allow you to run on bare metal, which can normally be acquired rapidly. And there's no need to wait 6 weeks for a box to be shipped from halfway across the world. It also gives you the option to purchase higher performance systems at any stage and redeploy NGINX on a higher performance system. And you can repurpose those previous systems and other functions in your hardware infrastructure, which again can provide you with long-term savings when you're able to recycle your bare metal servers. And the open source community. So the open source is increasingly becoming a hot topic in the world of services and application development. Historically, enterprises have looked at open source as an unsupported option with too much risk to include in their business systems and applications and processes. So most of the cloud native companies do offer their product as a free unsupported software solution, but normally provide a commercial version with support contracts and to ensure that you are compliant and have that single throat to choke perspective if things do go wrong. So the misconception that open source is a risk has changed and is no longer relevant if you're looking for robust supported solutions. The other part is the wealth of knowledge that is available in the open source community, which not only helps the end user to be creative in with the open source projects and how they are going to use that software and that application, but it also helps the open source projects in developing better solutions. Whereas if you are relying on a closed source proprietary vendor, you're normally limited by the amount of information that is provided to you through authenticated knowledge bases and closed communities, and you tend to be tied to the success or the failure of the vendor. So because of our open source community and the wealth of information there, NGINX is going to, the NGINX open source project will live on regardless of the NGINX Incorporated. And you'll still have that ability to get all the benefits and functions out of the open source community. Now, the fifth trend is microservices, and this is something that, particularly in region, we're seeing a lot of movement around. So F5 falls a bit short here because it is not really truly part of the microservices world, and they don't really provide things like containerized options of their offering, which is most likely due to the heavyweight nature of the F5 applications. And although in some respects they claim to provide ingress control into Kubernetes and things like that, they're actually just running a container which is reprogramming F5 hardware. NGINX Plus is available as a container and still remains the top downloaded application from Docker Hub. And we see this very commonly used in most deployments up in the cloud and even on-premise to communicate between cloud and on-premise. We also do provide a supported Kubernetes ingress controller, and it's often implemented as a micro load balancer inside a microservices environment. So due to the lightweight characteristics of NGINX and the feature-rich capabilities from the small 3 meg footprint that you get from each deployment of NGINX, it works very well within the microservices ecosystem. And we will remain to be heavily ingrained in the microservices world. So the next few slides, I'm going to give you 3 general options that we see people use to migrate gracefully away from F5. And the first step here is really it's most commonly when we see people that are wanting to move away, and they tend to be sort of halfway through their support contract with F5, and they'll start to experiment with how NGINX Plus can be used within their network. And it's the easiest way to actually do so. So what you'll find is the F5 will do all the layer 4 load balancers, the layer 4 load balancing into NGINX Plus, and then NGINX Plus doing the layer 7 load balancing of the applications to the backend systems. And this doesn't have to be deploy all for all servers and all services within your business. You can slowly start to migrate some of those services onto NGINX Plus, and that can be either by department, it could be just by the application. We see many different ways that people are slowly starting to change their infrastructure using NGINX Plus as opposed to F5. The next option we see is people deploying NGINX Plus parallel to the F5. And this can be a pretty good architecture if you're starting to adopt public cloud while still keeping that private data center available. So you'll find that people start to move some of their services up to the cloud and may start to use the NGINX Plus as load balancing those applications. And then as they move more of those applications up into the cloud, then NGINX Plus tends to do all that load balancing for them. And again, this is also a way of starting with one applications behind NGINX Plus and expanding that infrastructure into the cloud using NGINX Plus. And the final one is really completely decommissioning F5 and using NGINX Plus to do all load balancing. So the previous two architectures tend to be an intermediate step into going to this eventual outcome. If you are brave and you just do a complete rip and replace, then this is definitely a capability that you can do. Or if you just aren't actually using any sort of hardware load balancers and are starting with greenfield applications, this is definitely the way to go. Now, the next couple of slides, I'm really just going to talk about what NGINX Plus does in the modern application development world. So as I mentioned earlier, NGINX Plus, because of its lightweight and small footprint on any system, is used as a micro load balancer within applications. And this could be specific services within applications which are separated. And then again, as Anthony mentioned, that east-west traffic doing the communication between those different services and applications. And the configuration itself can be deployed alongside the application in GitHub. So it makes it quite easy to deploy, and regardless of where you're deploying to, whether it's on-premise in various different clouds, it's quite easy and lightweight to port to various different scenarios. Then, as mentioned a moment ago, we also do provide a Kubernetes ingress controller. And as an ingress controller, we have a configuration that can be used or pulled from our repository on how to implement NGINX as a Kubernetes ingress controller. And essentially this means that your clients will come in through the ingress controller on NGINX Plus, and then you've got all the additional features that you can implement as well, such as the caching, not only the load balancing, caching web application firewalls that can be implemented as well, and all the additional features that Anthony had mentioned and capabilities that Anthony mentioned in that slide that he presented to us earlier. So there's a lot of additional benefits that you can get from using NGINX as a ingress controller in Kubernetes. Then, again, as Anthony did mention earlier, about 40% of our clients are actually using NGINX instances as an API gateway. It's because of the positioning of NGINX as a load balancer, it works very well as an API gateway. It's perfectly positioned and has all the capabilities to deliver this function within an application or within an infrastructure. As an example, we have one of our customers in the US, Capital One, who's handling 12 billion transactions per day with NGINX as an API gateway. So a lot of traffic going through, and again, a lot of cost savings that they get from not only being able to use NGINX as an API gateway, but also use all those load balancing functions within that API gateway function within the network. And F5 Big IP cannot be used as an API gateway at all. So again, it's just a testament as to the various functions that NGINX can be used for within your infrastructure, and the scalability that you have within deploying your applications, and the mitigation of risk that you have in your automated infrastructure using NGINX Plus. For those who are interested, we do have a free ebook that's available on our website, which is how to deploy NGINX as an API gateway. So NGINX fits as a complement or replacement for existing API gateways and API management approaches. and it gives a lot of details as to how to use NGINX Plus as an API gateway and how to even use existing NGINX open source or NGINX Plus configurations to manage API traffic. So quite a bit of information in that ebook. I do recommend that if you are looking at implementing API gateways, it's definitely worth a read. It gives you some good strategies and approaches on how to achieve this. I'll give you a second just to copy that URL down at the bottom if you are getting that. Okay. So Anthony mentioned a moment ago that we did have NGINX Controller released at the beginning of the year. Our next iteration is due in the next couple of weeks, which is going to include the API management module, where you'll be able to manage API gateways from the NGINX controller. The screenshot is really just a basic screenshot of the NGINX controller itself, where you can assign specific variables that will give you a application health score, so you can at a glance be able to see what the performance is like on your application configurations. It has alerting built into it, so your email alerts can come through and let you know if there's anything that reaches a specific threshold that you have configured. It will send you alerts. The API management portion will be available, as mentioned, a couple of weeks' time. There's also a really good feature in here, which is a configuration analysis. And quite often I'll actually just use this to do a bit of a sanity check on what my configurations are like inside NGINX Plus. And it will basically tell you specifically where there are any errors, whether there's any SSL certificates that are expiring. It will also provide you with some recommendations on where you could improve the configuration of your NGINX Plus instances to provide the best practices for deploying NGINX Plus, as well as ensuring that you're optimizing your NGINX Plus configurations. It does have customizable dashboards as well, which is really handy because it gives you the option to take any of the 90 plus metrics that we collect through NGINX Plus, and you can build your own dashboards based on those specific parameters. So a lot of people are looking for different things in their application. So being able to have that customized dashboard where you can actually specifically see what the performance is like across all of your instances and troubleshoot any specific errors within those backend systems. The customized dashboards are very, very handy. There's also the load balancer management, where you can deploy additional upstream servers from the console itself. And then, of course, the general monitoring of your applications, as mentioned at the beginning of the slide. There is a link at the bottom if you'd like to learn more about that. It's on our website under products. There's NGINX Controller. I'm just going to take you through one of our customers' success stories. And this is really more specifically around the load balancing function that NGINX can provide. So AppNexus, they basically offer an internet platform and to its customers to buy and sell ads. So a portion of this application traffic is unique. So connections stay open longer because a series of requests are processed over these connections. Hardware load balancers were expensive, so AppNexus looked into software load balancers. AppNexus actually considered HA proxy and Apache as a reverse proxy, but it had concerns about multi-threading performance and multi-core machines. AppNexus did choose NGINX Plus for high-performance HTTP load balancing, as well as its proactive health checks and detailed statistics that you can get from NGINX Plus, from the dashboards, or even being able to pull it from an API call and being able to pull that into other applications and systems. And health checks basically maintain the high availability. And AppNexus use uses a DevOps process that involves frequent rolling upgrades. And NGINX Plus continually checks the health of the upstream servers and does not send requests to servers that have failed. So this minimizes latency and drop requests, and therefore any lost revenue when servers are taken out for maintenance or have failures. They also got the benefits of the detailed statistics, and the business is very data intensive, and they need to uncover errors quickly with the detailed statistics from NGINX Plus. And they can troubleshoot and continuously improve their business and business processes and the actual infrastructure that they're using. And the last point there is the significant reduction in costs that they had. So they replaced their expensive hardware load balancers with a cluster of 3 NGINX Plus instances at a lower cost per megabit per second per host. And also with the automation of Puppet, it really helped them save time in their application maintenance and management. So it's just a bit of a quote from one of their senior networking leaders. So moving to the next generation of F5 hardware was going to cost them about $1 million per data center. NGINX Plus gave them a 50% 50% more transactions per server for 1/6 of the cost, and they are now 100% hardware free in their application load balancing. There's a very great talk on YouTube where we had one of the network architects at AppNexus do a bit of a talk about what their migration process was like. If you do a search on YouTube, there's that code on the URL. If you just do a search on YouTube, you'll be able to see that video. It's a really good talk and really good. It gives you an idea of what their process was and may help you or assist you in the same process. And what next? So if you are looking for more resources on specifically on F5, then we do have a blog on our website. It's nginx.com/blog, or you can just use the search toolbar at the top of the page and just do a search for F5. And there's some resources there, not only the price and performance comparisons of NGINX Plus versus F5 Big IP, but there's also some blog posts on how to migrate load balancer configurations from F5. And there's also some additional resources on migrating layer 7 logic from F5 iRules and Citrix policies to NGINX and NGINX Plus. And generally, as far as our capabilities and so on, our blog posts are really good at giving you an idea of what capabilities there are within NGINX and some of the use cases that customers have had with it. Another thing I just want to make mention is that you can actually download a free trial of NGINX Plus if you are interested in trialing some of these configuration changes and seeing what the performance is like, or do a side-by-side comparison. Feel free, go ahead, download the free trial. I think it's 30 days, but yeah, if you're interested, have a download of the free trial and give it a go. There is, again, also a free ebook that we released today, I believe, and that's on how to migrate F5 Big IP configurations and iRules. Again, how to pick out standard x86 servers, how to install and configure a Linux, and why you should go with software load balancers and not hardware. So again, if you're interested, there's a URL over there. I'll give you a second to jot that down if you want to download that. But again, if you do a search on our website, you'll be able to find this ebook in the search results. Inside our deployment guides, so on our website, there's under resources, there's documentation on NGINX Plus. And as part of our deployment guides, there is also information on migrating migrating load balancer configurations, and as well as from Citrix Nextscaler to NGINX Plus. And again, still more information on other use cases of NGINX Plus in our deployment guides. Right, and really just to summarize what we've been through today. So F5 Big IP is an aging veteran of the tech industry. The market is moving away from F5, and they have not really kept up with the requirements of application development and application development processes. There are 3 ways to replace F5 Big IP with NGINX Plus. In our use cases of behind a layer 4 load balancer or in parallel to F5 and rip and replace. And then replacing F5 with NGINX Plus opens up new architecture capabilities such as microservices. And of course, there's an API gateway. And then our use case of AppNexus, who saved over 50% while getting the benefits of a software solution and by replacing F5 with NGINX Plus. So with that, we are going to open up to Q&A. And I'll leave this up here, just bear with me one moment. So a question I have here is, can we import Swagger or OAS API definitions into NGINX? Now, this is a capability that we have on our roadmap for the Q2 of next year, where we go with our next iteration after this upcoming deployment of our API gateway capabilities within the controller. So Swagger importing and exporting will be one of those items on the agenda for that deployment. The next question is, how do we translate complex I rules into NGINX? So generally, the NGINX configuration options is inherent to be able to handle some of those, or most of those I rules. We also do have a JavaScript component of NGINX where you can do some additional interesting things with your I rules. So the I rules, absolutely, they're quite inherent in the configuration of NGINX Plus, with additional capabilities available through JavaScripting and NGINX with something we called EngineScript, which is based off JavaScript.
We also have a question, sorry, Sean, I'll just cut in there for a sec, on NGINX Controller and how it's licensed. So NGINX Controller is a separate license. It comes with the ability to manage 20 NGINX Plus instances. And if you need any more, if you need the ability to manage any more instances than 20, then there's we can sell licenses in packs of 10. So just to go over that again, you have to buy a license for NGINX Controller, as well as have your license for NGINX Plus.
Thanks, Anthony. I don't see any additional questions coming through at this point in time, but I'd just like to encourage people, if you are interested in having a chat to us about NGINX Plus or our various products and capabilities, we do have a contact sales button on our website. And yeah, feel free to reach out to us. Either Anthony or myself will be in touch with you, and we can have a discussion about your use cases and any problems that you may be having or would need NGINX Plus to solve. That's it from me. I'll turn it over to Cheryl.
Thank you for joining us. The webinar recording and the slides will be available shortly on nginx.com in the webinar page under the Resources tab. Have a nice day.